Now, President Tinubu's assurance of improved electricity supply in Nigeria is seen as a welcome development, given the country's long-standing power challenges. In his New Year speech, President Tinubu listed electricity as one of the top priorities for 2024, emphasizing the need for a reliable power supply to drive economic growth and development. Nigeria has been grappling with persistent power crisis, with more than 40% of its population lacking access to electricity and facing constant blackouts. But what is likely to change going forward? To discuss this, I'm being joined by an expert in this industry. He is the managing director of Century Power Generation Limited, Dr. Chikweloka Ume. Dr. Ume, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining the program. Happy New Year to you.
Good afternoon, Tolu, and Happy New Year to you as well.
Yes. Well, let's start with President Tinubu's speech, which I highlighted in my introduction. The president harped on the need to improve power supply in Nigeria. Obviously, doing less than 4,000, 5,000 megawatts for a country of 200 million people is not the way to go. But how feasible is this, considering the present structure that we run?
Well, Tolu, I think the president's heart is in the right place, and he was absolutely right in saying that without a working power sector in this country, our economic growth will be marred or will be stunted. But the challenge that I see is we are still doing more of the same. We're talking about the country investing more money in the sector. The policies haven't necessarily changed. The structure is almost the same. So we're going to, at the end of his tenure, if something drastic is not done, see exactly the same kind of performance that we've seen in the past 8 years, which means nothing really is going to change. That's the unfortunate truth.
Very serious one. And you hit it just straight up there, Doc. But there are moves, and we've privatized this sector now for more than 10 years. Before I go to my next question, really, would you say that we are getting the positives of the privatization exercise?
So, Tolu, the question you have to ask is, have we really privatized the sector? And my answer is, no, we have not really privatized the sector. So we've sold off some Gencos.
And Discos.
That the government owned. No, let me start from the Gencos.
Okay, go ahead.
But you know that the government still owns about 10 Gencos under NDPHC, which is, I don't care what anybody tells you, it's still a government-owned entity overseen by the vice president. And now we're talking about building more Gencos, the government building more Gencos. So the government is really competing with the private sector. Now, Discos, you sold off 60% of the Discos to private companies, and government retained 40%. As you know, if government owns 1% of anything and they have someone sitting on the board of directors, we are still running like a government entity. Out of the 11 Discos that have sold, what have you seen? 4 of those Discos have failed and have been taken over by the banks. Yola Disco, that one failed right from the start, where you're still seeing ATC and C losses of up to 73%, and they're only able to remit about 12% of their bill every month, as at December last year. So, I mean, TCN is still owned and operated by the government. All the operating centers are still owned and operated by the government. So, Tolu, I said to you, the question is, have we really privatized the sector? And my answer, I'm sorry to be brutally honest, the answer is no, we have not. So we're still running around in circles, doing the same thing, which is nothing.
Now, there is a concrete plan by government now to unbundle the TCN. I want you to make us understand this. You are the professional here, in line with the Electricity Act. And a move that, as of course, reactions have started coming, even from the NLC and from the electricity workers and all of that. But for me, I would ask you, if this happens, what does it bring to the table? Is that the way to go? Because many will say, or many experts have said before now, that the transmission end seems to be the weakest link, though the TCN guys would not agree with that.
So the TCN guys can say whatever they want, but TCN is not able to wield over 5,200 megawatts of electricity today. as you know. And no matter what they say, no matter what advancements they have made, I mean, there are some really good people that work in TCN, don't get me wrong. But unfortunately, as a government entity, they are not doing what they need to do. See, Tolu, I usually look at myself as a simple engineer. And in engineering, if you want to solve a problem, you need to be able to boil it down to first principles. And if you boil what's happening in the sector down to first principles, you see that every part of that sector, not just TCN, has major problems. We are a country that generates power primarily by thermal means, which means running natural gas. About 85% or more of our power comes from natural gas. And when you look across the entire sector, I will not lay blame on TCN alone. I won't lay blame on the discos or the gencos or even the gas producers. I lay blame everywhere. If we want to start seeing real change, yes, the government needs to completely, not partially, completely unbundle TCN, put it in the hands of private sector, whether it's as a concession or whether it's outright sale. Just get it done. And every part of the value chain needs to have massive restructuring. And this is not, we can't be paying lip service to this anymore. If this government is serious, they need to, within this 2024, we still have just about almost 12 months to go. We can get it done. Forget the massive conversations, forget all the meetings and the consultations. If the government has a commando team, I'm using that word commando team because, as you know, in war, commandos are a very small but elite group of people, service members, that go in and do specific missions in a clinical fashion with high precision, high efficiency, and with every tool that they need. If we're serious, we need to use the same tactic in this case. We've seen it happen in some other places, in some other sectors. Unless we do the same thing here, we're going to continue to have this circle or this cycle of inefficiency and lack of productivity. And at the end of 4 years, unfortunately, President Tinubu would have nothing to show other than a lot of money spent. You know, we spent over 2 trillion naira in this sector in the past 8 years, in one form or the other. If that money had been put in private hands or the government used it to bolster private companies that are working in the sector, I can tell you that a lot of progress would have been made, but it hasn't been made.
Dr. Ume, bringing in the private guys is to make them invest more in this sector because government cannot do this alone. But there's an argument on the other side that even the private guys are not investing enough to support the sector. For example, ever since I've been hearing our capacity has always been 3,000, 4,000, 4,000. So what really are we talking when we talk about investment? What sort of investments are being put in place? Do you think the private guys are also doing enough to, meet their own part of that agreement?
I put it in context. I was invited to an economic summit by a state government in Nigeria last year, several months ago. And the government was talking about ways to increase the economic activity within its state. And, there was agriculture, there's aviation, there's infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And then there was power. So I spoke on the power part. And I simply said to the governor, this is really simple. You can't build power. You can't build power assets in your states. Private companies are going to do this. But those private companies, they have the money to invest. But for them to invest the money, you as the governor, you need to be brave in doing several things. Number one, you need to cut the red tape that will prevent these companies from doing what they need to do. All those regulations and whatever, boil them down, put a very small group of people in charge, and let them provide whatever support is needed to these private companies to do their job. Number two, you need to provide guarantees, and the guarantees come in terms of economic guarantees. I'm not asking you to give them money, but put money in the bank that says when these people make an investment, they produce power, they will get paid. And if they don't get paid, these guarantees will step in to pay. Number three, make sure that the agreements that you sign with these companies are ironclad, so that if anything goes wrong, the agreements will be honored. Anything short of this is a waste of time. Your time and the time of the investors. The investors know how to raise money. That's their job. They have some of their own money to get it done. But unless you do these things that I've just said, nobody's going to put a dime in your state. And the governor listened. Within a very short amount of time, the governor has done a lot of things that people thought could not be done. He had experts working. He supported the experts. He cut red tape. He put some guarantees in place. And these guys are doing amazing things. Same thing can happen in Nigeria as a whole. Instead of the government spending this money, continuously trying to shore up these schools or bootstrap people, put these monies away to be used as guarantees to support private companies. Make sure that the courts, the judicial system is well primed to back agreements that are entered into. And then, oh, by the way, let's stop this talk of tariff increase or no tariff increase. Let the system be driven specifically by the economics. If I produce electricity, if I distribute electricity, if I produce gas, if I transport gas, I should be able to charge you an amount that reflects the investment that I have made. I should be able to charge you an amount that also accounts for the profits that I am supposed to make. Because again, everyone makes an investment to make a return. Nobody's going to make an investment because they want to provide charity to you as a people or as a government. Today, if I want to buy a ticket on Airpeace or Ibom Air or whoever from Lagos to Abuja, I'm going to pay about 105,000 naira for a one-way ticket. Okay, and there's no one squeezing the necks of the airlines to say, no, you can't charge that. Go back and charge me 10,000 naira or 5,000 naira. Go and bring back Nigerian Airways to charge us this subsidized rate. Nobody says that. If MTN is giving me service, I pay whatever that tariff is. That's the way it is. I buy rice. If I buy 50 kg of rice, it's probably going to cost me 60,000 naira or more for Nigerian rice. No one is going to say, no, let's pay the price that I used to pay back 10 years ago. Nobody's going to do that. So why is it not the same in the electricity sector? Why is it not the same in the energy sector as a whole? It's because we continue to play politics with this sector. Every minister comes up, they make a lot of promises, and at the end of the day, I'm sorry, it's just words. Because some of them don't even understand what the sector is all about. We've seen one or two ministers that had a very clear understanding because they've walked miles in the shoes of people producing electricity, people distributing electricity. So they know where the pains are coming from, and they know how to make these pains go away. But unfortunately, if we are making political appointments, if we're making political statements, and we want to play nice, guess what? The sector will never, ever work. 8 years from today, or 4 years from today, we're still going to be saying the same thing. This president has a chance, a unique chance at this point to make a big change. And unfortunately, if they don't do some of these things and do it immediately, they're going to squander the next 4 years. That's the reality.
The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, of course, the regulatory body, has also been talking, making moves in recent times. We saw them take over some discos saying they could not meet up. Of course, liquidity issues and all with some of this distribution companies and all. What role do you really think NERC should play at this time moving forward to also make this market attractive to investors? What do you think they can do as a regulator to help support development in this market?
You know, my own approach to this is regulation should really be there to guide companies in their way of doing business. Regulation is set to help a sector to grow. In our case, in the electricity industry, we're seeing that we spend so much time, effort, and money on regulations to make them look really nice. We copy from different parts of the world, but when it comes to execution, it falls flat on its face. Because think about this. You cannot regulate a market into existence. You allow a market to start growing, and then you let the regulation follow to make sure that it grows. We are in a desperate situation in the country. Being in a desperate situation you need to allow this market to start growing, whether you look at it as a wild, wild west that used to be in the US, right? But once economic stability starts to come, growth starts to come, regulation should be smart to make sure that the people that are operating are respecting the environment, they're doing things according to the rules of the country, and whatever they do is in line with the general strategy of the country to move forward. We cannot create the regulation because it looks nice to lawyers on paper. Meanwhile, those lawyers don't even understand. If I tell them an MMBTU of energy, have no clue what an MMBTU is. If I say a megawatt, I have to sit down and define to you what a megawatt is. We can't do that, and that's what we're constantly seeing in the sector. So I say to NERC has some fantastic people, it has some wonderful people working there, but it is doing too much. Now you have the ministry trying to do NERC's job. You have NERC trying to do MBET's job. Some of these organizations shouldn't even be here in the first place. A lot of the people working in NERC, working in the ministry, working in TCN should be in the private industry, should be in the private sector, working with people like myself to make things happen. You know, I used to joke with one of the top shots in MBET many years ago when we were working on a power purchase agreement. I said, here you are making things very difficult for us to produce and sell electricity. One day you're going to come and join us in the private sector, and then you will understand the pains. He currently works in the private sector. Now he's shouting. And every time I hear his voice, I smile to myself. I say, I told you. You know, so NERC as an organization has a responsibility to the people of Nigeria to take several steps back and allow private companies to start running. You know, Tony, if I want to get a generating license, for example, it takes me months and a lot of money jumping through hurdles upon hurdles before I can get a scrap of paper called a license. And at the end of the day, for me to provide the electricity, I now have to go back and start talking to the banks or other investors to give me money, spending months and months and months. At the end of 2-3 years, we've wasted 3 years, burned through millions of dollars, and not 1 megawatt is generated. So the Ministry of Power, NERC, TCN, and everybody else that works for the government owe it to the masses. They owe it to the Nigerian people to take many, many steps back and allow this industry to grow. And, you know, unfortunately, we have many square pegs in round holes. Maybe not due to the fault of their own, but the government, the president, the vice president owe it to the people to start listening. And listening means you need to get those people that actually understand the industry, those people that have spent their own money and years in the industry, in the private sector, to tell you what needs to be done. You know, every time I look at the sector, I sit and I look at my 6 steps to get the sector working, and I just shake my head, say nobody's listening. The last time you and I spoke, I basically told you, please don't call me again, because this is a waste of my time and your time, because nobody seems to be listening. Well, here we are.
Indeed, we have to keep doing this. Before I let you go, Doc, finally, there is another investment plan. I'm worried here now. $20 billion US, according to the minister, Mr. Delabu, saying that this will be used again to expand power lines, to build new power plants, and of course, stabilize the sector. For me, how will this affect the outlook? Because a lot of spending is what we see.
You know, madness is defined, or insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We have spent and we spent and we spent, and the needle has not moved. Like you said a few minutes earlier, we continue to talk about 3,000 megawatts, 4,000 megawatts being generated in the country. This $20 billion will be flushed down the toilet. I would rather see that money put in banks and used as a guarantee or guarantees given to the people in the sector.
That is your take.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
I would rather see that money put in banks and used as guarantees for private companies. So if I want to build a 100-megawatt plant, for example, I need to borrow money from the banks or whoever else, right? I want to see that money put in the bank to serve as a guarantee to make sure that I have my liquidity. Liquidity means that when I produce electricity and I need to get paid, if they don't pay me, my money comes from that liquidity guarantee. Okay, the banks that will come to me to ask for security, that money can act as security. And oh, by the way, if I fail, the government has a backup. They can take my asset and sell it to somebody else, so they don't lose anything. Something like this has been done with Azura Power, and I still keep saying to you, Azura Power is the only project-financed power plant that we built in Nigeria ever that makes sense. Now, we have some other smaller ones, much smaller ones, but that one is the largest grid-connected plant that has been done. We can do a similar thing for gas generation, for pipeline construction, for GENCOs, and then whenever we decide to concession or sell TCN, the same thing for TCN, and then the discos, finally put together our act together. So that's what this money should be used for. Otherwise, we're going to see that money wasted, going in private pockets, and we will not be able to account for it at the end of the day. And we'll still be talking about 4,000 megawatts of power in Nigeria. That's the simple truth.
Well, I must thank you so much, Dr. Chukwueloka Ume, there, making us understand all of these issues. We'll keep doing our best to push for the best for Nigeria's power sector. Improvement is what we need. Everyone must have power because it will definitely improve lives and help grow the economy. Managing Director, Century Power Generation Limited, Dr. Chukwueloka Ume, thank you so much. We appreciate this. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tolu. Nice to be here.
All right, there are a lot of talks around